I can recall a time when I found immense difficulty in grasping the fundamental controls of Jak and Daxter: The Precursor Legacy. I was damn near convinced that the long jump function was broken. It almost felt like no matter what set of button combinations I input into the controller, there always seemed to be an inconsistency with which action Jak would perform. Of course, learning that this was in fact the crux of the issue as I grew older and a little wiser, I am proud to say that I have since completed the game. Suffice it to say, I had an admittedly poor track record as a youthful gamer, and due to what I considered to be something akin to learned helplessness during my early exposure to the medium, I would play any game I owned on easy mode. I enjoyed a mild challenge, something that I knew I could overcome in a matter of minutes, perhaps even seconds. But the moment that a challenge escalated beyond my established skill level, I would become frustrated, angry, in fact no, furious. I swear that the game was at fault. I'd just give up. I mean, why would anyone want to play a game that made the player die over and over and over and over? It must have been about 4 or 5 months after Demon's Souls' original release back in 2009 when I first stumbled upon its gameplay. I can vividly remember being completely enamored by the visuals and the weighted movement of the player character as they made their way through Astraea. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. When I finally got my hands on a copy a few days later, I was harshly introduced into the reality of what Demon's Souls actually was. And that's an unforgiving hellscape. It was clear to me right from the very start that this was a place where only the most masochistic masochists would dwell. No place for an easy mode casual. But something was different. Although I was staring at the "you died" screen following my inevitable timely demise more than I was able to flail my sword around like a lunatic, I was still enjoying it. The game presented a challenge that frustrated me, sure. Soon enough the anger I felt was palpable, but something drove me to continue playing. Perhaps it was the haunted worlds, the eerie yet peaceful melody from the Nexus, or maybe the Maiden in Black's pleasant, albeit barely audible incantations as I tried to level up using the meager souls I'd harvested from only the weakest of foes. Either way, something made me persevere. It took a while, probably far longer than it took most, but bosses were falling. I was winning, and although every other step towards victory was through a molasses of defeat, victory would taste all the sweeter because of it. Well, then I found Astraea. While I completely understand that the general consensus puts Astraea on the middling scale of difficulty, I wouldn't be exaggerating when I say that this area gave me conniptions. In fact, I'll openly confess that it was this area that led me to giving up on this game. And while the area boss Maneater bested me dozens of times, it was actually the Mind Flare just before the boss room that nearly drove me to insanity. I'm almost inclined to believe that it single-handedly created the superstition that it's bad luck to cross on the stairs. This Mind Flare broke me. But it didn't.
Yes, indeed. The dark sign brands the undead.
2 years later and Dark Souls arrived, and despite my past forays within the FromSoftware title, I wasted no time in heaving myself back into another chasm of masochistic nightmares. Although perhaps that metaphor would be better suited when describing Bloodborne. Now I could wax lyrical about my first experiences with Dark Souls and regale you with tales of victory and tales of defeat, but you've probably come to understand something already. I purchased Dark Souls knowing exactly what I was entering into. Well, relatively speaking anyway. This game was going to be difficult, I was going to struggle, and I was going to lose many, many times before I would win. And I was well aware that winning was never even a guarantee. But I still purchased it, and lo and behold, I would go on to purchase Dark Souls 2, Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, and even revisit Demon's Souls so that I could, if you'll excuse the pun, bury my demons and complete that game too. We all know that these games are revered as being difficult titles, basically hard mode or go home. But I was playing them. This behaviour had me asking two major questions. First of all, how are FromSoftware capable of drawing in me, an easy mode gamer? And not just for one game either, but for half a dozen. And that's not including the Demon's Souls remake and the vast quantity of equally challenging DLCs. Okay, perhaps that's not the most complex question to answer. There are two very clear surface level factors that can probably be attributed to what attracts, let's say, 90% of each game's player base. One, beautifully realised worlds that beg to be explored, and two, tight and engaging combat that expertly balances risk and reward. Okay, that's pretty simple, one question answered. Now what was question number two? You've just witnessed me take down a handful of enemies in 2018's outstanding God of War, and you could probably deduce with relative ease that this is not easy mode. Yep, you're quite right, this isn't normal mode either. This isn't even hard mode, but instead very hard mode, or what the developers like to refer to as Give Me God of War. Well, this is fairly uncharacteristic. Last time I checked, God of War wasn't a FromSoftware title. So much for being that easy mode gamer. In truth, and I'm sure this was a gradual thing, I actually grew out of my easy mode slippers and forked out for a pair of hard mode boots a while ago. There are very few, if any, games out there that I will play on anything less than hard difficulty these days. And just to clarify, this isn't intended to sound like some sort of bizarre flex. I should stress that it's not uncommon for me to feel like my eyes were too big for my stomach when it comes to some games' difficulty spikes. And God of War is absolutely one of those games. When speaking to a friend recently, also a FromSoftware veteran, he vocalized that he tends to play most other games on normal difficulty, as he feels that games are generally balanced with that in mind. I certainly can't fault his logic, I mean just look at the God of War difficulty select screen. We also came to the agreement that FromSoftware titles, at least for the most part, aren't difficult just for the sake of being difficult, despite what some of the marketing may suggest. Yet this conversation didn't change the way I approach games. This is Jedi Fallen Order, a great game often compared to Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, as they follow very similar principles when it comes to their core combat structure, i.e. posture and deflection. You're watching me play this on the hardest difficulty, and I will concede that this is a challenging game. I died many times and felt that in order to defeat a decent portion of the game's opponents, I had to apply my full concentration. The game really is excellent, by the way, and I don't want what I'm about to say to discourage anyone from trying it out if they haven't already. But I felt that the game wasn't difficult enough. I know what I'm saying sounds ridiculous. I'm on the verge of contradicting everything I just said. So why am I claiming it's too easy? Okay, let me elaborate. The Soulsborne series, along with Sekiro, the latter most notably in fact, require the player to learn intricate and often minute details about their opponent's movements. This is vital so that when an enemy chooses to attack, the correct countermeasure can be implemented, leading hopefully to an eventual victory. Dying over and over and over and over and over again isn't necessarily something to be viewed as a punishment, because what you're hopefully doing on each quote-unquote failed attempt is learning, maybe even subconsciously, the exploits of your opponent's various attack patterns. The dedication you put into learning those exploitations will at some point culminate, and possibly just by the skin of your teeth, you'll get to stand over your adversary victorious. I cannot understate the sense of accomplishment that you feel when these moments are actualized. So when it comes to Jedi Fallen Order, when I say it wasn't difficult enough, It's almost intended as a compliment. I really enjoyed the combat, I just wish there was more of it. I don't mean that by saying I wish there were more enemies, but instead, more combative complexities within the enemies that are already there. Instead, the current enemies are often too easy to read, or the variety of attacks weren't plentiful enough to pose enough of a challenge. I suppose I wanted the opportunity to learn and adapt to everything that the game was prepared to throw at me, but all too quickly I was declared the victor, and I'm left waiting for this far greater sense of accomplishment that I would ultimately never receive. At face value, I guess what I'm saying can be translated as, I wanted to lose more. Actually, that's pretty accurate. Jesus, what has FromSoftware done to me? And there it is, the second question. What has FromSoftware done to me? Possibly the easiest solution to this conundrum is only play the most difficult games in the industry, but it's not really that simple. If I chose to put that idea into practice, then I'd be alienating myself from a bunch of other games that I also still really want to play. So instead, it's not uncommon for me to tweak certain options within games, just so that I can have more of a challenge. For example, in Ghost of Tsushima, I choose not to upgrade the Tanto to ensure my stealth kills remain slow and encumbered to add extra risk. I seldom equip any armor sets that add damage resistance, and I never use charms that grant me greater health or superior melee output. In The Last of Us Part 1 and 2, I turn off virtually all HUD, partly to add greater immersion, but largely because I like to mentally keep track of my own ammunition and be punished if I miscount. I tend to manually compensate for weapon sway where I can, instead of acquiring the skill, and I generally find that because of this, I have an abundance of skill points that just go unused, because I want to be challenged. In Red Dead Redemption 2, I so rarely use Deadeye, it may as well not be a feature in the game. I think I have some kind of aversion to it because it almost feels like I'm cheating. I'm not technically quick on the draw if I can manipulate time. Believe me when I say that I am rolling my eyes as I list off some of these self-induced gameplay limitations. And of course, FromSoftware aren't actually to blame for any of them. But there's no doubt in my mind that they formed the catalyst that led me down this path. When I used to play games as a child, my ambition was pretty clear. I would just run and gun and hack and slash my way through levels because, from my perspective, the goal was to complete the game. Setting a game to anything other than its easiest difficulty was completely illogical. Why would anyone want to voluntarily hinder the ability to reach the goal? Games are an excellent medium for players to test their cognitive abilities and to push their reaction times to the absolute limit. I get bored of playing games that aren't challenging me. I actually find it quite frustrating. In fact, you know what? It angers me. Why would anyone want to play a game that doesn't kill you over and over and over and over?